behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to JLF's Brave New World. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Thanks to all the support we received from our speakers, audiences, and partners worldwide, JLF's Brave New World has been able to cross over 3 million views and bring to us conversations that are relevant, authentic, and innovative. Over the next few weeks, we will replay some of our episodes which you may have missed. JLF's Brave New World Season 1 Redux begins with The Sun and Her Flower. Rupi Kaur in conversation with Supriya Dravid. Canadian poet, illustrator, and author Rupi Kaur touches a visceral chord in audiences around the world. She joins us at JLF's Brave New World to read from her verses and share thoughts with editor-in-chief of Elle and author of A Cool Dark Place, Supriya Dravid, on her poetry, her process, and how she has channeled her creativity in the times of COVID. Rupi Kaur is a poet, artist, and performer. Her collection of poetry, Milk and Honey, self-published at the age of 21, and The Sun and Her Flowers, has sold millions of copies and has been translated over 40 languages. Her work touches on love, loss, trauma, healing, feminism, and migration. Supriya Dravid is the former editor-in-chief of Elle India. Her novel, A Cool Dark Place, was published by Penguin Random House. As you all are aware, all our sessions are available to view on our Facebook page, JLF LitFest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. Ladies and gentlemen, The Sun and Her Flowers, Rupi Kaur in conversation with Supriya Dravid.
Thank you, Sanjay. Hi,
Thank
Rupi.
you, Sanjay. Hi, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good, good. It's my day's just starting, so this is a great way to start my day. How's your day been?
So far, so good. The perfect way to wrap up a Sunday. Before we start, I can't help but request you to start with reciting a little poem that we decided earlier.
So this is page 99 of The Sun and Her Flowers. Let it go, let it leave, let it happen. Nothing in this world was promised or belonged to you anyway. All you own is yourself.
Thank you. I think in many ways that encapsulates a lot of what we are going through during this time, don't you think? It just seems very symbiotic of our lives at this point because we have no choice but to let it go and surrender to the universe, right?
Exactly. I think that's a truth that's always existed, but now more than ever, it's just so glaringly obvious. And that's what I feel like this time is really bringing up. It's the truths that have always been present, but we were moving too quickly to notice them. And now in this moment of stillness, we see them.
How are you doing through this lockdown in Toronto? What is it like being home for you? Because I know you travel a fair bit. So what is it like for you?
I mean, I'm really privileged and lucky to be safe and healthy. And I left New York where I was living, and I was able to come home to Toronto and be with my parents, which is nice. And it's different. I mean, I think for everyone, all of our plans changed. I wasn't supposed to be in Toronto. And initially I was a little bit scared because I haven't been here with them for a decade. And so I was like, oh my God, what is this going to be like? But you know what? As far as dysfunctional families go, I think that we've kind of figured out boundaries, and it's a kind of a gift because I realize I will never ever get this type of time with them ever again. And so I was talking to one of my friends, Maya, and she said, because her and I travel all of the time, and she said that for us to get this amount of concentrated time, we wouldn't have gotten it over a period of maybe 5 or 10 years. And so it's just nice to now have that opportunity to learn about my parents, because like, I don't know about your parents, but my parents are, you know, like, I don't even know a thing about them. And so now at the age of like 27, yes, 27, I'm asking them questions about their childhood and their upbringing and their traumas. And because they aren't, you know, my dad for the first time is not working due to this. So now we're having those conversations, and it's just been nice to connect with the people that matter most to me.
You also wrote a very nice poem on Mother's Day. Was it inspired a little bit with the time that you've been spending at home since you've been away for so long?
Yeah, while I've been just traveling and doing this work, I've been just feeling this like parent guilt, I call it. That's what I'm referring to it in like my new book. I call it parent guilt. And it's this feeling of like wanting to run off and build your own life. But then when you're like off building your own life, you're like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this time. I'm not going to have time with them forever. I don't know how much time they have left. And so that was really what that piece is about. And it has been, that parent guilt has definitely been alleviated. We've never, ever spent time like this together. And so it's nice to get to know the people who made me, because I never got the opportunity to do that growing up.
It's also nice because you also realize their value of elderly parents, and we realize what they mean to us now more so than ever, right?
Oh God, yeah. Like, I was the worst teenager. I was like, I hate you guys. I was convinced my parents hated me and they didn't love me because they were stopping me from doing everything under the sun. But it's different to build a relationship with them as an adult, because you understand that they're just human beings, and they were also just trying with you, and you get to know them differently. And I think I started to realize that like when I was in India for a tour 2 years ago, that's when I met you. My dad came with me, and I was like,
he came with you, right? I remember.
and that was the first time I realized like my dad is just a human being, because we were out of the that domestic environment, and we were like on planes together in a different country. And so my sort of relationship with forming an adult relationship with him, in terms of like more than just father and daughter, but two people, started then.
And you went back with him to Punjab, right? During that time?
Yes.
Was it different going back with him as an adult?
It was different. But I don't really have a lot to compare it to, because we didn't get the opportunity to come back often, like when we moved here, because just like financially and stuff. So I don't really have a lot to compare it to. But I will say, traveling with my dad, he's a different person when he travels, which is a good thing. He's a lot more chill and easygoing, which is not really, always the case at home.
So during this time at lockdown, you're hosting a lot of writing workshops, and you're sharing an entire process of writing. You're opening up to your readers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that kind of, I don't even know how it started, but basically I was supposed to be finishing up my third book during this time.
Yeah.
And so I had like all these elaborate plans of where I was going to go to write the book, and, and then the lockdown happened, and all of my plans, like everybody else's, just canceled. And it was really, I think we were all across the world, we were feeling this collective grief. For that first like 1 or 2 weeks, like not understanding what's happening. And there was this anxiety, I feel like, in the air that a lot of people were discussing. And I would be like really emotional randomly and just could not focus. And that was giving me so much anxiety, because I was like,
you were traveling a lot. Yeah.
And I was like, I have a manuscript due. I don't have time to not do it. And so the first couple of weeks, I did absolutely nothing. And I think that was really important, because that's also a part of creativity, I feel like. And those are the moments where stuff is being made in us. And so I was feeling confused. And I think when I feel confused and when I feel anxious and lost, what helps me is connecting with people. And that's why I started sharing my work in the first place. And so this idea came to me like, why don't I just do a workshop? I do them in person and they always leave me feeling so full and so grateful and reminding me why I do this work. And so I posted about it and I just started bringing people into my process of writing, which has always just been free writing, which is arriving at my desk every day and meeting myself where I am and trying to do some sort of deep listening to see what's happening in my subconscious. And it's just been a really nice way to connect and step outside myself. Because I think when you do that and when I bring people on at the end of the sessions to share their work with me, you just realize like, oh my goodness, this world is like, I think often human beings, we find ourselves feeling like we're the center of our world, but we're not. And so when you can connect and share with people, you realize it's so much bigger than you. And then the pressure and the anxiety sort of fades for that moment.
And your poems have, enduring themes of love, heartbreak, and the many trials and tribulations of womanhood. They're also about being kind to yourself. It's like what you said, deep listening. Tell me a little bit about self-care and how this time has helped you understand the most important art of stillness.
Yeah, self-care and stillness, two things I'm very bad at, which I think a lot of people are really bad at because our usual pace does not allow for stillness, and I think we all require it, and I think we've all been aching for it, and now in this really twisted way, we've been forced into a moment of stillness, and what it's kind of forced me to do, and I've been speaking to other people about it, and they've said that it's forced them to develop routine and ritual that they've been putting off for years. And, like I've been trying to do self-care for, and when I say self-care, I mean more than just like putting on a face mask. Like that's great. But sometimes I think the most important self-care is like that inner discipline and going deeper and being like, what do I need that I don't necessarily enjoy doing? And that's been forcing myself to like move my body when I don't want to, and like meditating, knowing that, when I need to meditate the most, I don't want to sit there, but I have to sit there because I know what the benefits are. And so because there's nothing else to do, I think self-care routine and ritual has been a lot easier to develop now because we're not rushing off to go to the next thing. And I don't know about you, but I found that usually in my, like before COVID, it was always the self-care things that got thrown out of my schedule before anything else. And so
Always
now there's no excuse. Right? Always.
I'm going to, I read something that you'd written. If you could accept that perfection is impossible, what would you stop obsessing over? What would you stop obsessing over?
Oh, God. Yeah, that.
I know I didn't read it well, but
no, you read it beautifully. I would stop obsessing over trying to make every hour of my day as productive as possible. I would stop obsessing over things about me that I don't like. Like I always I'll like look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, I'm always looking at my nose. I wish I could just like look in the mirror and not see my friggin' nose because it's like, like it's my nose and I should just live with it. But other than that, I would also stop obsessing over trying to be perfect in my writing. And I think if we could like stop obsessing over the little things, then we could just enjoy it. But when we're obsessing, it's just like the time is passing by because we're waiting for the moment where those things for those things to like fix themselves.
So let's talk about your poetry. And I'm going back to the time when your first book, Milk and Honey, was published. You were 22 then, and you were 25 when The Sun and Her Flowers was published. Tell me a little bit about Rupi at those ages, because they are formative years. And you've grown immensely, and your readers have also grown with you.
Yeah.
It's one thing to write free of fame, and to think that you self-published and then published and got, a publisher came on board and sold 3.5 million copies. And when you published The Sun and the Flowers, did you ever feel the sense of pressure while okay, now I have this, I have to deliver. Did you ever feel that sense of pressure at all?
Oh God, yes.
How did you deal with
I
it?
I like think about the time of when I wrote The Sun and Her Flowers, and it makes me want to throw up because the pressure was so. I remember when I was writing that book, I would get these crazy migraines that would last 72 hours because, and I didn't even know, like in hindsight, I know it was pressure, but I just was in such a bad place mentally that I was like crawling out and just trying to put something out because I had deadlines to meet. And I was a baby when I published Milk and Honey, and I was growing up when I published The Sun and Her Flowers. And I think I only started to deal with it and take care of my mental health maybe a year ago. That's when I started. Because I didn't, writing Milk and Honey was so amazing and great because nobody was looking and I wasn't trying to write a
Yeah.
book. So I was free. And then it was like I suddenly didn't feel free anymore because I had to figure out how to reproduce something as successful. But I had no idea how I even did it the first time.
I think fearlessness, right? In many ways, it's you're diving into the unknown, but you're being so fearless because words were your biggest weapon, and you started with you started writing on Tumblr, and then you went on Instagram, and I think it was a lot to do with fearlessness more than anything, right?
I think so, for sure. I think so because I think one thing, I didn't have any fear when writing Milk and Honey, and I think that comes with like that concept of having nothing to lose. But with The Sun and Her Flowers and book 3, there's been so much fear. And I've never had to really deal with fear because, you know, no, I never used to be, was very fearless. And I think that comes with, you know, when you're young, you don't know any
Yeah.
better. You're just like, and this, especially the latest book and with The Sun and Her Flowers, it was constant fear. And especially with The Sun and Her Flowers, I think I felt like I had something to prove, like, oh, I deserve to be here. And what do people want me to say? What do people want to hear? And for book 3, I've been channeling that fearlessness again, trying to remind myself I'm doing this for me. And that's where the magic is. It's like bringing that fearlessness back and protecting myself.
The Sun and Her Flowers is divided into 5 chapters, and it's illustrated by you. It's a journey of wilting, falling, rooting, rising, and blooming. But it's a celebration of love in all its forms. What is your favorite and why? And tell me how you broke up those chapters and why did you do that?
Ooh, I feel like when it comes to like titles and colors and chapters, it just like drops in my head and I just go with it. My favorite chapter has to be chapter 3, which is rooting, and it's about migration, it's about immigration, it's about my parents, and it's such a personal chapter. I mean, I miss them so much when I was writing this book because I wasn't with them and I didn't see them for a long time. And so I think it was just written because I had immense parent guilt. And I was just like, I think when I hit that, I just started to contemplate my parents' mortality. Like when you're a kid, you're so self-absorbed that you think your parents are also going to be around forever. And then I stepped out into the real world and I was like, oh my God, I don't have forever with them. I have so much I need to learn about them. And then that chapter was born, and it's my favorite because I think it's a really important one.
Do you want to read something from that chapter?
Yes. I'm going to read. Let me read. Okay. This is page 142. So sometimes when I'm like, it's like 2 a.m. in the middle of the night. I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes I like cry myself to sleep. When I just think about certain things, especially when I think about my mom, because she's just given so much of her life's joys up for us, her 4 kids. And so I always think about how I could possibly give back to her, and this poem was inspired by that. What if there isn't enough time to give her what she deserves? Do you think if I begged the sky hard enough, my mother's soul would return to me as my daughter? so I could give her the comfort she gave me my whole life.
Beautiful.
Thank
Did
you.
did you share it with your mother when you wrote it? What did she take in with all of this?
Not when I wrote it. I shared it with her when she was at a show and I performed it on stage.
The illustration process, did that happen simultaneously, or did that also happen over time?
For the book or
Yeah.
in general?
In general, both.
Yeah, I've been drawing since it was like my first form of expression. I've been drawing since I was 5 years old. And then when poetry kind of became my thing and something I was really into, I stopped drawing. And one night I just felt really guilty because this was back in 2013, because I felt like I gave up my first love of drawing for this new, like, sexy, loud art, which was poetry. And I was wondering, like, is it possible to bring them together? Like, how could I possibly do that? And that's when I started exploring, like, drawing on my laptop, on my computer. And that's how the style was I started, like, including the illustrations into it. With Milk and Honey, the poems and the drawings were created together because I was just, like, sharing them online and I didn't think that they would be a book. But with The Sun and Her Flowers, I wrote the manuscript first and then I put things in order, and then I did the illustrations afterwards. And that's kind of the process I'm doing with the new book as well.
I think one of the most important aspects of being a writer is knowing when to stop working on that sentence. And your poems are very concise, it's nuanced, it's layered, it's very measured. How many drafts before you know that you have it? And it's also very lucid thinking. That's what, when I read your poems, that's what that's what I think. How do you realize that this, when you started, even with Milk and Honey and moving on to Sun and Her Flowers, how did you realize that this was going to be your meter?
There was never really a point that I realized it. I didn't even think about that. I feel like it's such a gut feeling. Like, sometimes, like, people think, oh, these poems are so simple. It's probably like you wake up in the morning, you have a thought and you write it down. But it's like more like I wake up in the morning, I write down pages and pages, and then I have to scrape and excavate and dig into the core of what it is. And some poems have like 100 different iterations. Some poems I've still been editing for years, and some poems get written in the first second because they've been writing inside you for so long. And so there's really no answer. I think you just, like, the gut knows. Like, my stomach tells me when it's done. It's a feeling of, like, it turns a little bit. And sometimes I'm rushing it. I show it my friends because I want them to tell me, oh, this is great. Girl, it's finished. Move on. And I only show them because my gut isn't telling me, and they'll be like, no, Roops, this is not that great. Like, get back to work. And I'm like, damn it. But the gut will tell you. And I think now more than ever, I'm realizing, wow, writing is a lot of work, because you just editing the same, like, 50 words for days and days and days. And I don't get the same with Milk and Honey. I was writing a poem, sharing it online, and then getting instant feedback and instant feedback, and it felt great. And now, I was getting like people were giving me applause like twice a week, but now it's like I disappeared for 3 years to write a book, and I'm not sharing any new work at all. And so you have to be your own, like, audience and clap for yourself.
What gets you started? Is it when you're writing book 3, or when you're writing a poem? What gets you started? Is it a feeling? Is it a moment? Is it a memory? Is it an emotion? Is it something that's obviously going on in your mind for a long time? But what is it that really gets you to put pen to paper?
I think it's a feeling. On the best days, it's a feeling where you're sort of, like, drawn to it, and you could be sitting anywhere and you're like, I need to leave here and I need to go to my journal and I need to start writing. But then there's lots of days, maybe weeks and months, where there's no feeling at all, and you're just like, I have nothing left to give. Like, I was having that conversation with myself. I was on a Zoom call with my friends earlier during the beginning of the quarantine, And I told them, I'm like, there's nothing in me now. And like, those are the moments when I feel like you have to go to your desk and you have to put in, even if it's just that hour, because most of the time you have to like dig through that writer's block, as I call it. And
do you ever get those?
oh my God, yes. All the time. All the time. I don't know if I like believe in writer's block or if I don't believe it, because I've heard both sides of the story, but I feel blocked a lot. And recently I was thinking that maybe like my experience in writer's block is when I'm writing something, but my inside is trying to write something else, and that block happens because there's some sort of conflict and the two aren't, I'm not listening. And so a lot of creativity for me during this time has also been to not write, and realizing that creativity is also knowing how to do nothing well. Creativity is also putting your books away, going to have a conversation with a sibling or a family member, anybody you love. It is doing something that is not work. And when we do that, when we live, that living automatically turns into the making. So I think and I have a whole chapter in my new book about it, that concept of what productivity should be seen as and what creativity really is versus what capitalism has told us it is.
I think I also want to talk to you about when you started writing Milk and Honey, the way you write in all lower cases. And I read somewhere where you mentioned that it's very that you've been inspired by the Gurmukhi script. Do you want to talk a little bit about that to people who don't know why you write the way you do?
Yeah, sure. So I, of course, English is my second language. My first language is Punjabi, and I know how to read, write Punjabi, all of that, because my parents were hell bent on, making sure that we did not forget where we came from, which I'm very grateful for as an adult, but as a kid, hated it. And so when I started to write, of course, it was in English, which is now I know it better than I know Punjabi. But then I felt a little bit guilty that I wasn't able to communicate with my words through Punjabi. And for a long time, this is before I published Milk and Honey, I tried to write poetry in Punjabi and it failed miserably. And then I was just like, damn it, like the colonizer wins again, I can't even write in my mother tongue the way that I want to. And so I thought, wouldn't it be kind of neat and like a kind of like an FU to break up the rules of English and take something from Gurmukhi and Punjabi and mix it in? And it's the fact that like Gurmukhi there's no cases.
There's no cases, yeah.
And so that's why I use only lowercase. And in terms of punctuation, there's only periods, which is represented by like 2 lines for going vertical. And so it's just like my fun little way of like secretly paying homage to my first language.
To me, your poems are, intimate and personal. And your words also, in a way, resonate and echo what other people are thinking, but unable to express. What, according to you, and in your poems, do you feel connects most with your readers?
I think what connects most with my readers is what connects most with me. Like, when we can do a really good job of listening to hear and investigating here and taking the time to really, really go into whatever very specific and precise experience it is, that will always connect. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's kind of been my experience with my work. When I try too hard to connect, it never lands. But when I try to like forget connecting with them and just focus on what I need, that ends up working out.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think in many ways it has to come from the heart. And when you present it to the world, they will pick up on that, right?
Yeah.
It's the most immediate human reaction to it.
Right. And
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think what I hear a lot of people say is, oh my goodness, you write the words that like I was like thinking, but I didn't know how to put them together. And that's why I started to write, because
Hmm.
I never had the language to express how I was feeling or what I was going through. And writing for me was my fight for that voice and that fight to understand and point out, oh, that is what I feel. That's my experience. And it was sort of like empowering myself. And that's kind of, I think that's why words are so important. That's why they touch us so much, is because so many of us, we struggle to find language. And I struggle to find language. And that's why when we can sort of put words together in a way that land, it feels so powerful.
Did you ever think, I know you said drawing was your first love, but it's poetry right now. That seems to be your calling. Did you ever think that this would be your calling, your sustenance, that you'd be recording shows in LA? Did you ever think that when you started writing on Tumblr that this is what you will be doing for almost the rest of your life?
Oh God, no. I think if like I knew that, I don't even know if I would have done it. Like, I still wake up in the morning confused, like, should I be studying for like my LSAT? Like, wasn't I supposed to go to law school or something? Like, I'm
Yeah.
so I don't know, my brain can't really, because I never, like, who goes home and tells their parents, hey, mom and dad, I want to be a poet? Like, that's insane. But I feel very gifted in terms of what the world has given me which is the gift to just connect and share. Like, I feel so grateful to be able to do that. And if, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I hate writing. Like, this is so annoying. I don't want to edit anymore. It sucks.
You never have holidays too. Yeah.
Yeah, but
There's no off day. You have to do it.
No, 24/7, this thing is going on. Like,
it keeps going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just try to remember the gift of just being able to connect and try and stay grateful, which, what we all have to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know exactly what that's like.
Yeah. Yes. Your popularity also gave rise to the term poet entrepreneur, which I don't quite fathom. But I read an article where you quoted to say that you treat it like running a business, but the greatest investment for you there is your head and your heart. Tell me, what is a typical day for you? Otherwise, not when you're in lockdown, but otherwise, what has been a typical day for you?
A typical day.
You moved to New York, right?
I did, yes, in September. And a typical day is kind of like wake up, very boring. I'm very boring. Wake up, have tea, have toast, and then I will do like my free writing. So this is like just time to like let go and write whatever I need to write. And then I'll like meditate, I'll have maybe a bigger breakfast, and then I start editing. Some days I write for 2 hours, some days I'll write for 6 hours. And then in between all that, of course, I have to dedicate time for emails, doing my voice practice and performing practice and trying to keep that up as well. And then just like doing admin work and all of that kind of stuff. And then of course I always try to make some time to have fun, because like most people, I also forget to do that. Fun. You think you don't need to actually have real human fun. So now I'm forcing myself to do those things. So yesterday I went for a bike ride.
I think, when I was writing, I always believe that you have to write on a computer that's not connected to the internet, because otherwise there will be something pressing that you have to go down that rabbit hole. But do you follow any of those?
100%. One thing, so I always write in, I always have this large journal. That's what I do my free writing in, because if I'm free writing on a laptop, no, I'm going to exit, I'm going to delete, I'm going to start editing, and it's just not going to be a nice, like, organic way to just let go. And now I keep my phone, which is the biggest distraction in my life, in another room. I don't even want to see that thing.
Yeah.
And when I do bring it to my laptop, because I do my editing on my laptop, email, Wi-Fi, all of it is shut off. People don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'll talk to everyone in the evening. After 8 o'clock, that's when I like come out of my hole and start to socialize. But before then, I'm just, because I get distracted so easily. And the thing is, if I see a notification for an email, I can't write, because it's clawing at me on the inside. Like, oh, I should just respond to that. I'm just a people pleaser. Like, I just want to like do all the things and knock everything off my to-do list. But I was reading somewhere that distraction is really the biggest thing, like the worst thing for a writer is all the interruptions. That's what stops us from doing our best work. So how can we stop those interruptions?
I think I read an interview by Paul Thoreau who said that the best phrase that a writer can hear is "your lunch is ready." So basically, you get up, you write, and someone's told you that, and that's about it.
It's so true.
It is true, right? Tell me
and
about
right now, my mom is doing that.
Tell me about book 3. Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? What are you writing? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's another collection of poetry. It is. I have been I think Milk and Honey was me processing the first 20 years of my life. And then The Sun and Her Flowers was a whirlwind. I don't even know that yet. And I think book 3 has been me processing the last 5 years, which have been a whirlwind, which have been some of the worst years in some ways and some of the best years. And so this book 3 is just me like digging in and writing the book that I need at this time. So there's a lot about creativity, mental health.
It's important.
Mm-hmm.
When are you likely to finish writing it?
I have no idea. That's the number one question.
I'm going to go
my manuscript, but let's see. I don't know. God knows.
I'm going to go through some of the audience questions right now. And okay. I think but just before the end of the session, I want you to read a little bit of what you've probably been writing during this lockdown. So we'll come back to that. I'm just going to look into the questions right now. Give me a second. Okay. Sachdev Ramakrishna asked, Rupi, could you detail a bit of your unique writing style, lowercase characters? Writing style, lowercase characters, and the use of period as punctuations. It really makes the words stand out visually on the page. Mm-hmm. You did answer that question, actually. Do you want to go over it again?
Well, I answered the Gurmukhi part of it. Also, like if we want to touch base on the fact that they are more striking on the page, I find that when you don't have capitals, there's a sort of, I'm such a visual person. Yeah. There's when it's all lowercase, there's a sort of symmetry visually because there's not weight on one side and no weight on the other. And so I find that just sort of creates a nice symbiotic world. And also just when I do use periods, I use them as like almost like an exclamation point. Like I'm putting this here because I want you to pay attention to it. So they're very intentional.
Ritika asks, you seem to have done a lot out of feeling guilty. Do you feel unhappy or weighed down with any emotion that you experience?
At different times, yes. I mean, I think I'm learning how to just be forgiving. I think I felt for the last couple of years, I've been feeling really guilty and weighed down. But in processing and doing the self-care, I've been sort of forgiving myself for the mistakes that I've made, for the things that I wish I'd done that I didn't do. For a lot of the time, I've also just felt guilty for not taking care of myself. And I'm also forgiving myself for that. And I think what helps to do that is connecting, talking about it and realizing we're all kind of going through the same thing.
Neville asks, as you reflect about an event, individual experience, which ones come to mind as memorable that lead you to this moment?
I think I end up focusing on the worst memories and the best memories because those are the ones that sort of leave their marks or leave their scars. And those are the ones that sort of stay with us. And I think I was writing a piece about this a couple of days ago. I am realizing that happiness is not necessarily like feeling good all the time. It's realizing that I'll always carry a deep sorrow for her because some of the things that I've experienced are just not going to go away. And that's okay because it doesn't mean that I'm also not going to carry the joy.
Okay. Om Prakash here has a question. Poets play with words, they love words, but do words agonize you?
When they're not easy to deal with, yes. I love words. You know, the relationship can be complicated.
Neeraj P. Sharma asks, in your opinion, is your poetry more on the subjective confessional side or not?
I think it depends on what poem you're looking at. I think a lot of people, like chapter 3 in Milk and the Sun and Her Flowers, is called Boat. And I mean, I'm not a refugee who like experienced that like migration, leaving one's country on a boat. So it depends on the piece that you're looking at. But I think that because I use the I pronoun so much, that it can be seen as very subjective or sometimes not. So I guess it depends on the piece individually.
Agastya asks, self-published writers are not given prominent importance in literary community. At what point did you decide that you need to self-publish your book, and how did you promote it?
Yeah, I had no, oh my God, it was such a insane decision. I mean, I asked my creative writing professor, oh, I have like, what do you think? Like, who do you think is going to publish a book of poetry? And at that time, nobody was publishing poetry unless the poet was dead and old and gone. And so she was like, yeah, nobody. But here, she gave me a list of journals and anthologies to submit to. I started doing that. I took pieces and I was submitting them to a bunch of places. And I mean, like every writer, I faced a lot of rejection. And then I think I just was a little bit impatient, and I realized this is not, splitting this book up and throwing pieces out into the world and hoping they land is not working, because Milk and Honey, although it's about 183 different poems, the way that I've organized it, it's almost like it's one poem. And it's like a continuous song with like 183 different verses. And it would be a disservice to split that up and publish it in different places. And I didn't have the resources or the network to know where to begin in the literary world, finding an agent. Like nobody was going to pay attention to a 20-year-old brown girl. And so exactly. I self-published, and I was very lucky because I had like a community. I'd been developing a readership online, and I was very much like, and they're the ones that told me, where's your book? And I'm very fortunate because it was a lot of word of mouth, and that's how the sales sort of and the marketing worked. I think people really enjoyed it, and they bought copies for their moms and their sisters and their friends. And that's kind of what I see at shows too. People just come and they want to like share it with other people, or they'll bring me their copy and be like, actually my friend gave it to me, but I read it and I never gave it back. And so can you sign it? And that's kind of the self-publishing journey.
And it was rare, right? Seeing a woman of color writing poetry that transcends generation, that transcends color, people. Mm-hmm. It was rare to see someone like you put out words that we all wanted to hear. So I think that made a huge impact and difference as well, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, and even right now, can you please talk about your favorite poet or poetess?
Yes. I think two automatically come to mind. My favorite is probably Khalil Gibran. My dad was a real big fan of the Prophet. And so poetry I'm sick. And so poetry it's just a part of the faith, and it's a part of the life. And, you know, we sing poems, and when somebody is born, and there's sort of that poetry and verse as we through life. And so he introduced me to the Prophet when I was pretty young. And that's a book that I read. It was the first book I read during quarantine. I just gravitated towards it because I read it at the worst of times and the best of times, because I think that Khalil Gibran's poems just ground you. And somebody else I read for inspiration is Sharon Olds, who I think, as just for me as a woman, her poems make me feel so free. And I love Supriya Kaur, who is a Punjabi singer. Like, her verses are so beautiful, and I listen to a lot of her when I'm writing as well.
Neha asks, do you have any tips for upcoming poets?
Could you say that again?
Neha asks, do you have any tips for up-and-coming poets?
Just keep writing and don't give up and keep working on your craft. It's the hours you put in. I truly believe that.
Simran asks, can you just explain about the odes you have written in The Sun and Her Flowers? Could you explain it? The ode.
The odes. I think what Simran's referring to is like at the bottom of some of the illustrations. Yeah, so these are, I think I have 3 in The Sun and Her Flower, and it's like paintings or works of art that inspired that illustration. So for example, Amrita Shergill, who's one of my favorite painters, she made this painting called Village Scene 1938. Maybe it looks very familiar because it's just an illustration of her work. Then I have a painting by Matisse in here and another one. And so that's just me saying the original is a painting by so-and-so if you want to check it out.
Saskia asks you, as an artist, I know the feeling to present something great, which might not turn out as perfect as you thought. It can feel like failing and causes me fear for next creations. Do you have any advice?
Oh God, I need advice. It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about it, because I have that exact same experience, and the advice I've been given is to sort of lean into that fear, and rather than running away from it, look it in the face and like have a conversation with it. And one exercise I do a lot is when I'm feeling fear, I write fear a letter. So I just write Dear Fear, and I sort of free write a letter. And I think that when you lean into something that you're afraid of, you realize that it's actually not that scary at all up close.
Maureen asks you, it seems so bad that, like you said, it feels like you don't have anything in you anymore to write about. How do you get that inspiration again?
I think one thing a lot of people struggle with is feeling like, and I struggle with it too, is feeling like I have nothing left to give. Like, oh my goodness, everything I wanted to say, everything I could have created is like, it's done, it's gone, and there's nothing left. And at that moment, even though every part of your body feels like that is true and you have nothing left to give, you have to find a way to ignore that voice, put the work away, and come back to it the next day. I think it's a balance of letting go, going away, and doing, because it's creativity is also discipline, and so it's showing up regardless. And there's many days where I don't feel like creative at all. I'll write for 2 hours and I hate it, and then on the 3rd hour it comes, and that's just what it is. And you're absolutely a normal human being, and every artist feels that way, every writer feels that way, and that's just that's why it's hard.
Sumit Singh asks you a question. What would you suggest to someone who has never written before and who wants to start doing so?
Ooh, every human beings are creative. When we're children, we're so fearless. We like drawing and writing are so natural to us. It's, I think all of us have done it, especially as children. And then we grow up and we stop doing those things because we think that those are not grown-up things to do. And so it's in all of us, and it's just a matter of starting and not judging. So get yourself a journal, write intentions on the first page, and start with the intention of like, whatever I write, I will not judge it. I am doing this. It's an act of self-care for myself, and I'm going to do it not for an outcome, but for the actual process, and it'll become easier. I think when we judge ourselves and we put all these expectations on ourselves, that's when the joy in the activity is gone.
Yeah, I think the idea is to never give up, never give in, and to just keep at it, right? That's
Exactly,
all.
exactly.
That's all the questions we have here. But before I let you go, I'm going to get you to read something for us, and then we'll hand it over to Sanjay.
Okay. I want to read a piece called Community because I think that, especially during this time, what we're realizing is like we can't survive anything without each other, and we are so, so interconnected. When the world comes crashing at your feet, it's okay to let others help pick up the pieces. If we're present to take part in your happiness when your circumstances are great, well, then we are more than capable of sharing your pain.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rupi. It was a pleasure talking to you as always. Over to you,
Thank
Sanjay.
Supriya. Bye, everyone.
Session. It was incredible, and I do hope all of you are going to go out and immediately start writing, being motivated by what Rupi has said. But remember, you need to put in time, energy, and effort, and really have something to say before you put pen to paper. We hope you enjoyed that conversation, and we'll log back on at 8:30 p.m. for our next session, Writing Family, Avni Doshi and Diksha Basu in conversation. Two Indian writers speak of their different takes on family life, one full of wit and humor, the other dark and overshadowed by pain and misunderstanding. In this conversation, the 2020 Man Booker long-listed author Avni Doshi and actor and writer Diksha Basu discussed the nuances of love, friendship, betrayal, alienation, and class conflict in their work. See you at 8:30 p.m.